The Spotlight, shining a light on podcasts and videos that have caught our attention.
Hi and welcome to The Spotlight. My name is Jen Spiker and today I'm highlighting part of a recent conversation that Andrew McLennan had on 2020. David Bahnsen is the founder and chief investment officer of the Bahnsen Group, based in Wall Street, New York City. David has recently released a book titled Full-Time: Work and the Meaning of Life. Andrew spoke with David on 2020 to explore why he believes that our secular jobs hold significance to God.
The Spotlight with Jen Spiker.
Our special guest today challenges the way Christian people are sometimes afraid of the topic of work. And the way we think about work may be keeping us from effective service in the marketplace. Our special guest is David Bahnsen. He's the founder and chief investment officer of the Bahnsen Group, a wealth management firm overseeing more than $5 billion of client assets. He's been named as one of America's top financial advisors by Forbes and the Financial Times in the US. He's also a former Chairman's Club managing director of Morgan Stanley and a frequent television commentator on CNBC, Fox Business, and Bloomberg. David Bahnsen's new book is called Full-Time: Work and the Meaning of Life. And it's our great pleasure to welcome David Bahnsen onto 2020 today. David, welcome.
Well, thanks so much for having me. It's wonderful to be with you.
Well, it's good to have you all the way from what we call the Big Apple, which is New York City, live via Skype. We're talking with you. And David, you obviously have quite a large resume there in the workplace. Where did this book come from? What really spurred you to want to write this book?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's actually helped me to think through the answer to that since the book came out, because I was so motivated writing the book and felt so passionately about what I was writing. And I don't think I ever really crystallized exactly what prompted me to write it. I felt passionately about a theology of work for a long time. But I do believe there's a sense in which I was angry. I was concerned. I was upset at what I think is a declining value placed on work, both in the society at large, but in the church as well. I think that the church not serving as a sort of counter voice to the world about the importance of work, particularly during the COVID moment, it really animated me and helped serve as the motivation to write this book.
Yeah, so are you saying you've observed, obviously you're based in the States there, a declining work ethic in the States in the last few years?
There's no question about it. And I would love to think it's only in the States. I suspect it's taking place other countries around the world, but I think it's palpable in the United States that there is a declining view of work, more and more viewing work as the source of their problems, that we have more people who are depressed, more people who are alienated because of work, where my view is that work is the solution to some of these problems, not the cause of these problems. And if I don't think I would have written the book if it were just that. But I think when you combine that societal diagnosis with a church that I think is largely serving as an echo to that message, not preaching about the created purpose of work, but more preaching with a defensive posture, a warning about work. It caused me to write this book to sort of plead with us to hit the reset button, to get back to a point of viewing work the way I believe God views it.
Yeah, absolutely. And your book is called Full-Time: Work and the Meaning of Life. I like that title. What inspired you to choose that title?
Well, there's a book here in the States that came out many years ago called Halftime: Moving from Success to Significance. And it sold almost 1 million copies. It's written by a gentleman named Bob Buford. He's passed away a couple years ago, but the book has been used in thousands of churches around the world as sort of a study guide. And it makes the case that half of our lives we work and we try to be successful, but then at halftime we want to reset and repivot to really spend the second half of our lives doing significant work, the stuff that really matters. And my book was called Full Time because I think that halftime message is wrong. I don't believe that God asked us to do the first half of our lives one way, but then pivot in the second half of our lives to something different. I think the work we do in the first half of our lives is significant. And that dichotomy between success and significance is not found in the Bible. The kingdom of God is bigger than that. And I think that idea that everybody is having a midlife crisis and we need to correct the midlife crisis by doing ministry in the second half of our lives, even though the first half was spent doing that necessary business stuff, I don't think that's the way to look at it. So I wrote a book to counter that view.
Just when you were speaking then, it reminded me of a gentleman I met years ago who was a new Christian in the 70s when there was a lot of messaging about Jesus is coming soon and get ready, it's any day now. And, one day there's going to be a lawnmower being pushed on the lawns with no one pushing it. And he said a lot of his friends and him, they didn't go to university. They didn't focus on careers. They just sort of, got jobs anywhere, washing cars or in a supermarket, waiting for Jesus to come back. And he said 20 years later, they all realized we missed it because the leaders in industry and in media and in government and all around the world were non-Christian people because people like him as Christians didn't engage in the marketplace actively enough to become leaders in their fields. And here we are in a world today which so many of our major institutions are dominated by non-Christians.
I think that's exactly right. And what's interesting is that the church largely retreated from a lot of these institutions about 100 years ago and was not as prominent in the arts, in politics, and education. And there's been a sense in which I'm encouraged that the church has come back into some of those arenas in the last 30, 40 years. Here in the States, the momentum in the homeschool movement and Christian school movement in education is significant. But the one area that I don't think the church has ever re-engaged is the marketplace, is what we call commercial society. Those elements of industry, whether it be business and finance, technology, engineering, those vocational callings that we have that I believe are such a vital part of the kingdom of God.
Absolutely. And you're a man, you've got $5 billion under management right now running an investment firm. So obviously a busy guy, so you understand the value of work. But what if someone said to you, who was obviously very naive and maybe didn't fully understand the scriptures, and said, oh, how can you be managing $5 billion as a career or a job or a business, as a Christian man? What's your response to that?
To be faithful to the parable of the talents. To be faithful to what the book of Proverbs says time and time again. The only thing they can do is put their money to work, meeting the needs of someone who produces goods and services. So those goods and services get used to meet human needs, and they need capital from investors to do that. So what I view my job as is to put capital to work that creates a return for clients. And it only does so if that capital is meeting needs of producers and entrepreneurs and risk takers. And those risk takers and entrepreneurs only are successful if they're meeting the needs of other people who like their product, like their service, utilize them to have a more fulfilling life. It builds civilization. So the day and age of Christians that are against capital markets, against finance as a vehicle for enhancing the quality of life, creating human flourishing, growing the kingdom of God, those days need to come to an end. So when people ask about how I work in Wall Street, I vehemently defend it as a vital area for the dominion mandate that we have from the book of Genesis.
David, let's talk about the Garden of Eden. Tell me what you see when you read the story of Adam in the garden.
Well, I start the book there, and I think it's very important that Christians often start their understanding of various things with the Garden of Eden. Genesis 1 is the beginning, and I believe that there are creational norms that we find in Genesis 1 that really are important to our understanding of work. And effectively, the first 25 verses are, and David is creating the oceans and the planets and the sun and moon and stars and eventually the animal kingdom. He's creating these big, beautiful things. And every day, at the end of the day, he stops and says, it was good. It was good. And then he creates mankind. And he says in verse 31, it was very good. He made mankind very good. And the verses in between, I think, answer the question as to why. He said he made us in his image. He made us in his likeness. It repeats it 4 times in 2 verses. That we and we alone are uniquely made in the image of God. We have souls that can never die. We have an eternal destiny. And we were created with a certain reason and rational faculty, self-preservation, with a capacity to do great things. And in verses 26 through 28 of Genesis 1, in the Garden of Eden, before sin ever entered the world, God said he made us to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth, subdue it, and rule over it. And then in Genesis 2, he goes on to say he wanted us to care for the garden, to extract the full value out of God's creation. God made us to be creators with him. Now, God creates out of nothing, and we cannot create out of nothing. We create out of the raw materials of the world that God created. But that's how we make things like an iPhone, a computer. That's how mankind invented the wheel or learned how to start a fire, is that we have a unique mental ingenuity, a creativity to solve problems and to do things that make better circumstances for mankind, that lead to more flourishing, fulfilling, successful lives. Everything I just said is called work. Everything I said is a byproduct of work, the way God worked. What does it mean to be made in the image of God? I don't know everything. I can't do everything. I can't be. Only God can do those things. What we can do that we share with God as his image bearer is work and produce and create. And he didn't make half of us to do that, and the other half are kind of second-class earthly citizens. He made all of us in his image, all of us in his likeness. Therefore, I believe he made all of us for the blessing of work.
On the Spotlight, we've been listening to part of a recent 2020 conversation between Andrew McLennan and author and Wall Street investor David Bahnsen. There's lots more of this conversation, including listener questions for David on the significance of work. You can listen to the podcast or watch the full video by tapping the Watch tab on the Vision app and scroll to the 2020 channel. My name is Jen Spiker. Join me next time as I share another podcast or video that deserves highlighting.
For more great podcasts and videos like the one featured today, check out vision.org.au or the free Vision app.